Hello, I'm Gauthier Gillot. I'm a third-year PhD student at Le Mans University, and I'm going to show you the main results of my work on the acoustics of a water drop impact on a water surface. So everybody knows the particular sound of a drop impacting a liquid surface. But where does this sound come from? In order to understand that, you need to study the hydrodynamics of the impact. That's what Worthington did in one of the first studies of drop impacts at the beginning of the 20th century. He used instantaneous photography in order to capture the different steps of an impact. Later, by adding an hydrophone to record the underwater sound synchronized with the photograph, Franz was able to link the impact hydrodynamics with the sound. He highlighted that the sound of a drop impact is in part the sound of the initial impact and mostly the sound of an air bubble entrapped in the liquid. Given that bubble entrainment is the main event during the impact, the later study investigated the different bubble entrainment regimes. The main results is this diagram by Pumfeld and Moore, which highlights different bubble entrainment regime depending on both the impact velocity and the drop diameter. After that, most of the studies focus on the regular entrainment regime. While the work reported in the literature concerned the hydrodynamic of the impact, only a few studied the acoustics of the impact. So the aim of the work presented here is to study a water-in-water high-energy impact regime near the irregular entrainment regime, as displayed here on Pumfeld and Elmore diagram, which happens to be quite reproducible and to lead to a particular bubble entrainment. To identify also the origin of the different acoustics events happening during the impact, both underwater and in the air, and to compare the results with the existing models and understand the differences. Here you can see the experimental setup used for the measure. The drop is created by a ceramic pusher connected to a hose and falls into a water tank. The acoustic signal is recorded underwater and in the air by an hydrophone and a microphone, respectively. A video is taken by a high-speed camera to observe the hydrodynamic. The acquisition is triggered by an infrared sensor that detects the drops as it falls, and then the acoustic measurements are resynchronized with the video by correcting the flight time, knowing the distance between the microphone, hydrophone, and the impact points. We repeated the measurement 50 times to study the repeatability. In this presentation, I will detail four main results of this study concerning both the hydrodynamic of the region and the acoustic signal emitted. First, let's talk about the hydrodynamics. Let's hear a typical acoustic signal of an impact in this configuration. We can see its temporal representation here with both microphone above and hydrophone below. We can see two main acoustic events, one at the beginning and one 150 milliseconds later. We are able to identify the sources of these events thanks to the synchronized video footage. So, at the initial impact, microphone signal shows a small pressure peak. The hydrophone shows an initial rise in pressure due to the impact, followed by variations of the hydrodynamic pressure related to the cavity movements. After, as the cavity retracts, it projects jets called a Rayleigh jet above the surface. The jet rises until a maximum height, then collapses and detaches two secondary droplets. All this part is silent, both underwater and in the air. The last part shows the main acoustic event. The video shows a bubble entrapment by a secondary droplet closing an air cavity. The acoustic events start at the moment the bubble detaches. So let's focus on the bubble entrainment mechanism. The air cavity due to the collapse of the jet's base is closed by the first falling secondary droplet with a zip-like flow propagating around the contact line. During this closing, we can see an evolution of the pressure recorded on both signals before the bubble sound. In particular, the microphone shows a particular pattern consisting of a depression followed by a sharp pressure peak before the beginning of the oscillations. When we compared this pattern from several acquisitions, we saw that it follows a master curve both for the depression and for the pressure peak just after. We don't understand this behavior yet, but we noticed that the amplitude seems to depend on the velocity difference between the closing secondary droplet and the cavity bottom. Now let's talk about the bubble frequency. So this signal, as you can see, looks like damped oscillations from a 1 degree of freedom system. Indeed, a vibrating bubble can be considered as a mass spring system, the gas inside it being the spring, and the liquid around being the mass, with an energy dissipation through three mechanisms. The natural frequency of the system can be calculated with Minard frequency formula displayed here. It links the bubble natural frequency to its radius and properties of the gas and the liquid. In our study, we compared the link between the measured oscillation frequency and the corresponding measured bubble radius on several acoustic signals with Minard's model. We can see a non-negligible difference, the measured frequency being systematically higher than the model. In order to understand this difference, let's look at the hypothesis behind Minard's model. So Minard's model considers a spherical bubble in an infinite medium. However, in our case, the bubble is near the interface, so more in a semi-infinite medium, and its shapes, it's quite distorted, often far from a sphere. So we need to take these conditions into account to correct Minard frequency. These corrections of Minard frequency have been calculated by Strasberg. As he explains in his paper, the proximity to a free interface and the deformation of the bubble lead to an increase of the bubble's natural frequency, as we observed. So we use the corrective coefficients proposed by Strasberg to correct the measured frequency, and we can see that the results fit quite well with Minard frequency. It is worth noticing that the bubble interface distance correction has a way bigger influence, 92%, than the bubble deformation, only 8%. We also notice that for some measurements, if we look at the time frequency representation of the bubble signal, we can see a rise in the frequency at the end of the signal. How can we explain that? We can use the same tool than before, the variation of the bubble's natural frequency with its deformation and its distance to the interface. Using a tracking algorithm on the bubble during its vibration, we can calculate the corrective coefficient frame by frame. And as you can see on the video, the main event leading to this increase in frequency is the water-air interface getting closer to the bubble, with this air cavity created behind the bubble. As you can see, the corrected frequency fits quite well with the measurement. Now that we understood the frequency of these oscillations, let's focus on their damping. A bubble damping depends on three dissipation mechanisms: thermic dissipation, viscous dissipation, and energy loss due to acoustic emissions. These mechanisms depend on gas and liquid properties and on the bubble size. But as you can see here, the apparent damping on the microphone signal above seems to be larger than on the hydrophone signal. Indeed, when the apparent damping characteristic time of the different bubble signals are measured on the microphone and the hydrophone signal, the results of the hydrophone are far from microphones and the theory. And how can we explain this again? Simply by considering our medium. Our measures are made in a tank, but the tank is a very reverberant environment. So the apparent damping on the hydrophone signal is mostly the tank damping. In order to check this hypothesis, we went to a swimming pool to measure our drop impact in a medium so large that the first echoes arrive to the hydrophone after the bubble has finished to vibrate. The results show a better agreement between microphone and hydrophone damping, and with a non-theoretical damping time. So finally, let's talk about the acoustic transmission of the bubble sound through the interface. As you may wonder, How can we be able to hear the sound of an underwater bubble in the air, considering that it is well known the water interface can be considered as almost completely reflective? Indeed, the theoretical transmission coefficient between water and air is very low, as the measured transmission coefficient is about 2 orders of magnitude higher. Let's find out why. The low transmission value is obtained because of the great impedance mismatch between water and air, but it is only valid considering a source infinitely far from the interface. In our case, the acoustic source is very close to the interface compared to its wavelength, so we cannot neglect the near-field contributions at the interface. What happened is that the evanescent waves in water will still have a great amplitude at the interface despite their exponential decay, are coupling with propagative modes in the air. So the transmitted energy is increased compared to an infinitely far source. In fact, we have a transmission coefficient that depends on the ratio between the source wavelength and its distance to the interface, and that tends to the non-low value as this ratio decreases. These explanations come from the work of Godin on the transmission of low-frequency sources near the water-air interface. So we performed some finite element simulations in order to check this hypothesis. We simulated a monopolar source under the water-air interface, and we calculated the transmission coefficient for different source interface distance and frequencies. As you can see, as the source gets further from the interface, the transmission decreases as the evanescence fields get weaker at the interface. The same thing happened for a fixed distance as the frequency rises because of the extent of the evanescence field depends on the wavelength of the source. The main things to look at is the values of the simulated transmission coefficients, which are of the same order or magnitude as the measurement. In conclusion, we have seen a new bubble entraînement mechanism involving a zip-like mechanism that happens during the Rayleigh jet collapse for high energy impact. We have also pointed out and explained the main differences between the measurements of the bubble acoustic signal in a case of drop impact and the classic model of bubble acoustics and acoustic transmission by considering the proximity of the interface and the acoustics of the medium. If you're interested, the results presented here are detailed in an article published in April of this year in Physics of Fluid. Thank you for your attention.